Oh, kia ora and welcome to Mana Talanoa. It's our Legends of League series. Andre Whitaker here. Look, it's a real pleasure. In fact, it's a privilege to welcome these two gentlemen from one of the oldest clubs in Wellington and who have played in the National League winning final for the club back in 1982. So welcome to Mark Brandon and Mike Edmonds. Kia ora kōrua.
Kia ora, Andre. Pleasure to be here, mate.
No, yeah, thank you for the invite, Andre. Awesome to be able to connect with you both. And hey, look, let's start off and talk about, because you both didn't start at Petone and it came down to the club. So we'll talk about your heritage. Let's start with you, Mike. Your heritage, your whakapapa, where you go back to.
Well, I was born in Te Awamutu. That's a little country town outside of Hamilton, known for where the spit ends come from. My dad was a returned soldier. Worked in the bush, and he's a hunter provider, a really good father. So good that I'm writing a book about him, about my father, you know. And then when the work ran out there, we went to a place called Rotoiti, not Rotoiti in Rotorua, but a place in Mangakino, just outside Mangakino, Whakamaru, where the Whakamaru Dam is.
Yeah.
And he worked up in a bush called Tiriraupanga. He worked up there. And eventually my mum got the call that she wanted to go back and to help with the kingitanga, and we moved to Ngarawahia, and that's when my future and my football career started in Ngarawahia.
Well, that's really interesting, Mike. A couple of things you mentioned there. I think Mangakino just rings a bell. I remember them way back in the early Wrangler Cup days. They actually had a team that made it through, and that was huge for the town. You know, a mill timber town in the back of nowhere, and suddenly they're on prime TV on the weekend. So, and then also I understand so you got an involvement now with the sort of iwi affairs as well right now.
I have. I got my timing right because I'm in the cleaning business. I bought a franchise, and just prior to the lockdown, I thought, they're going to have a lockdown. So we sort of had training in COVID and sanitisation and that. So I shot back to our marae 2 weeks prior to the shutdown, the first shutdown, and sanitised our marae and that, and got them all upgraded and what to expect and that. And that was rewarding. It was rewarding. You all get this feeling that you want to go back to your marae and help. And I thought, that was the best way to help. And I'm still helping down that track as well.
Oh, magnificent. Awesome to hear that, Mike. And over to you, Mark, mate, your background, and you tell us about your heritage and your family.
Yeah, no, thanks very much. And lovely, interesting, and hearing Mike's side from his younger days and the respect he had for his father, and what a wonderful father he was. Man, I was born in Lower Hutt, believe it or not. And 6 months later, my mum and dad moved out to Titahi Bay, and we lived in a state advances house, as they're called. Grew up there. I got heavily involved in sport as a 5-year-old and got into athletics and had a mum that really supported me through sport. I had 2 older sisters and a younger brother. So we were a typical, post-war family. Struggled at times and just enjoyed the simplicities of life. We never had a car. We were classed as probably real below the thing, but had a loving mother and a father, and kept the family tight. But one thing I was privileged to have was a mother that supported me through sport, through athletics, and because the first game of rugby or rugby league I've ever played for was for Miramar, believe it or not.
Right.
I had a couple of a gentleman called Bill Matira, who coached me as a kid. So we were very sport orientated. I did apprenticeship as a printer. I used to get to travel into Wellington every day as an apprentice printer. So I got into the printing trade. And then, got into senior rugby league as a 16-year-old. And
wow.
I remember as a 16-year-old marking Garth Davison out at, what's your park here at the club rooms?
Strand Park.
Strand Park. Yeah. And it was Ike Callahan. He he was living at our place at the time. He lived there for a few years. You know, he sort of boarded with our family. And cut a long story short, I was playing just senior seconds or senior thirds, and I got called into a game. I said to me, "Listen, we're short today on the wing. We're playing Randwick at Strand Park," and I just remember this monster, Garth Davison. Here's me, 10 stone, ringing where. No, I remember the score, believe it. It was my first senior game as a 16-year-old, and we got beat 9-3. And I had a try just delivered to me on the line, and I dropped it cold. First senior game. So, but look, I had a great upbringing. We were tight as a family, and we were like most people. You know, we didn't have much, but enjoyed what we had, and had a lovely childhood. You know.
No, really interesting, mate. And mentioning there that, you know, we describe it as a state house background, but that's kind of what rugby league people come from.
Yes.
You know, we're working. It's a working class background, and where the players come from. And interesting too, acknowledging your mum and her involvement with you in sport, because to go from Titahi Bay all the way to Miramar in those days, you'd pretty much be organised and be committed to want to do that, eh? And so right. You know, fantastic that, you know, having parents for both of you to do that. Yeah. And I don't know, had Garth Davidson won his Mr. Hutt Valley competition when you were making it back in those days?
It was 1969. I remember the day, and I remember it. And so I just ran out on the field, and when they, you know, when we marked up, and then I looked across the paddock and I saw this monster. I thought, friggin' hell, what am I going to do here? You know, but I kept him in net, believe it or not, and I'm not known for my defence, but that day I just somehow I got in the way most of the times, you know.
Yeah, well, we'll be able to tell a few stories about Garth and those Randwick challenges, because I know the Panthers like to get stuck into them when they got the ball. Well, let's talk about coming down and coming over to play for Petone. Mike, so were you playing league at Ngaruawahia, and then was that your introduction, or?
I was going to primary school and I was playing rugby for the club Ngaruawahia Rugby Union, and I was good enough to play for the first 15. Ngaruawahia were only playing second division back there then, but I was vice captain while I was at primary school of the first 15 at Ngaruawahia High School. And then I was still going to primary school, and eventually I got in the third form and I was still playing for the first 15. And for some reason they cancelled all the football in Waikato, and they rarely do that. I was looking for a game and all my mates were playing league. So they conned me and go into this trial. I didn't want to go because I wanted to be All Black, man. I was just All Blacks through and through, you know. I was the man. I was watching all these All Blacks, Don Clark in particular, because I used to watch him kick. I used to kick both feet, and I was the kicker of the teams, every team I played for. So I went and trialled, and at this trial, my dad's best mate, a fellow called Joe Crackett, he was playing for Waikato then, and Dan Solomon, they were coaches. I didn't realise there was a Waikato under-15 trial. Well, I scored 6 tries on that day, and you know, because I was just having fun, you know, and I thought, geez, this is a good game. You know, first game I've played. Yeah. And I got a call over, Andrew Berriman came over. He was the coach of the great Andrew Berriman came over and said, have you played league before, Mike? I said, no, I've never played. He said, well, you're the captain of the Waikato side. We go down to Greymouth 2 weeks' time. I said, oh, I'll have to ask my dad first. And he said, no, your dad already knows because Joe's already told him, you know, he's here trialing. He's over there in the corner. Yes. Wow. So I got mocked up, you know. I thought, this is nice. They got us rosettes and bags and that. They gave us all these things, and I was ready to move. And then I went back to high school the Monday after. I was told to stand up in front of the assembly. Got up, stood up in front of the assembly, and they said, Mike Edmonds, you played league in the weekend? I said, yes. He said, they suspended me from school. They suspended me from school. So I went home. My dad said to me, he said, oh boy, I heard you got suspended from school, because he's on PTA meeting, you know, they're all ex-army people, teachers and that, and they're all his friends down the RSA and that. He said, I heard you got suspended. I said, yeah. I don't know why, Dad, but I said, if they can do that to me while I want to play the sport I want to play, or can control it, I'm going to stick to league, Dad. He said, you do what you have to do, boy. So eventually we went down to Greymouth. We played in 1966, went down to Greymouth, and I was at the Frankton railway station, ready to get on the train to go somewhere, maybe down here to Wellington, to catch motocross. And I saw my dad, and my dad was crying. And I didn't know what he was crying for, I was so embarrassed. I was, he looks drunk, he's crying. But that was the first time I thought, what I think now, just tears of joy because he saw me, he was so proud of me. But I went down to spend some good time down with, if you've had any dealings with people from down at the West Coast, very, very generous and very, very kind people, really nice people.
Yeah.
But I made schoolboy Kiwis down there, and there was no cell phones or anything like that. And I wanted to tell my dad I made the team. I couldn't ring him up. So I had to go down the pub. I had to walk down to the pub. There was a pub. We stayed in a place called Dobson, and it was a long way to the pub. So I walked down to the pub and asked the proprietor if I could ring my dad. I eventually got him. He was down the pub because he used to drink with King Koreki, at the RSA in Narawai. And I got him there and told him, and then he started howling again because my dad was a tough bugger, And there was that changed my attitude. I just wanted to go and play rugby league. But at the same time, I had two pretty well-off brothers. They were called the Bull Brothers from out of Wanga. They owned big farms out there. They were sort of supportive of me, trying to get me to stay into rugby union. But then I found out, a lot of discrimination against Māori or Polynesian players. I copped it there. I was involved with roller mills. Roller mills is a pathways for anyone in rugby union back in the Waikato. Yeah. I played for the Rangers and the roller mills, and I had high aspirations of being an All Black. And I thought I can go the whole way because I was training well. I had a teacher, Mr. Ang, who was an umpire for the Olympic Games in volleyball or Commonwealth Games. He was And he said to me, Edmonds, or he used to call me Egmont, because he couldn't pronounce my name, Egmont.
Get it right.
For you to succeed in rugby league or any sport you're going to pursue, you got to do the weights. So he trusted me with the keys for the weight room. We were only doing repetition because we were only young fellas. So we're just doing repetitions, and he taught me right from the start. You have to do that. At the same time, I was an advocate of doing the upper Lydia long distance running and that, and I was doing that at the same time. I was only 14. I was that good enough that I didn't think I was that good enough, but during that time, they had the coronation and they introduced me as a player that made the Kiwis for Waikato at the coronation before the finals. The day before the finals, Waikato were playing Auckland in the finals on the Sunday. And Ricky Muru in this, he made the 17s and he was introduced too. So I asked, do you want to play in the finals tomorrow? Well, they two under 17s, but I wanted to play. So I played for Waikato when I was 14 years old. Waikato Māoris, that was the biggest thrill of my life, playing for Waikato. I played on the wing. I got beaten by Waikato, but we played against some good players like Monga Emery. I played with Ray Sonnell. Sam Edwards was playing on. Joe Gunn was playing on the other side. So I was playing against these really top rugby league players at that time. And as a kid. I got cleaned out a couple of times. But that's the way it went in those days, So that's my story into rugby league. That was my transition.
And then from there, you came down to Petone, obviously, and joined the Petone club.
I came down because we were getting in a little bit of trouble, idle hands, idle minds, and that. We were sort of getting into trouble. And amongst Tupai was my best friend. And he'd already come down the year earlier. He said, come on, Ed, we'll go down there. We had a saying in Narawai, because everyone said, you got an ugly factory. They were referring to the ladies. You got an ugly factory in Narawai. So our names for anyone from Narawai was Ugg. We could go down the street and we had our own language. We'd yell out Ugg, and we used to call each other Ugg. Well, Mum said to me, Ugg, we should go down to bloody Wellington. I've been down there, we're going to work for Alpha. I said, yeah, we'll get out of here. So we did. We moved down there and went down to the hostel and started down here with Petone. And it was compulsory to play for Petone. If you went to the hostel and worked at the gear, they guaranteed you a job, and we worked at the gear.
Hey, look, magnificent for sharing all those insights and history. And a lot of people, some of the things you shared about the what rugby league was up against in those days. I think people don't realise it wasn't just the case of a sport. There was a lot of strong bias against rugby league. It went right back to the schools, and I thank you for sharing that. And then that journey of coming through, playing as a young fella, getting cleaned out. That must be where you learned how to clean out all the other fellas when you come down to Wellington. But yeah, awesome. And that Petone gear meet. Yeah, there was the recruitment. It was probably the first of professional footy behaviour. You know, you get a job if you come and play league for Petone, and you know, there was probably, even though they're mainly all Tainui fellas that came down, but yeah, awesome. Hey, for you, Mark, you know, you started off at Porirua. Was that the first league club you started at, and then transitioned to Petone?
Yeah, it was. And that was an interesting story, Mike. I just love listening to that. That journey for you coming through, and then, as you said, getting cleaned out. I think there was payback along the line. Yeah, no, look, Andre, I started with Miramar as a kid, and had about 2 or 3 years as a 7 or 8 year old, and then ended up playing rugby for Titahi Bay, and then played there till I was played under 17s, and then I got asked by a couple of the boys I was kicking around with. They were leagueies, and they said, "Look, hey, we're short this week," and I'd finished playing Union at about 1 o'clock, and they had a 3 o'clock game down at Elsden Park there, and ended up having a run, and like Mike in his first game, scored 4 tries, and I think, hang on, this ain't a bad game, you know. And there was a lot more freedom, and it just suited my style, you know. I mean, rugby was kick and clap, punt and grunt, whatever you want to call it. And as much as I love the game, I flicked the switch, and my first game at Porus City was senior first, or senior second. I'm just turned 16, and the rest is history. So, and then carried on there till I was 1972. And once I got into the first grade, you know, I started to have a bit of success as a player, you know, and then after 1972, I had this feeling that can Porus City win a premiership? So what am I, 72? I'm 19. So at that point, and this has not been derogatory towards Porus City, I don't think they could win a premiership. I knew a team that could win a premiership. Yeah. And I went over to, I thought, well, if I can get on the end of that back line, and it wasn't guaranteed I was going to go to Petone and you know, cement a spot, because they had, you know, Harold Graham, they had you know, a few other top line backs and wingers. So I had to sort of go there with intrepid feelings, and it was strange, you know, leaving a comfortable environment where I was at Porus City. I'd been there 4 years, 1 year in first grade. So I thought I could benefit from Petone, and I thought they could benefit from me. So that brought me, I thought if any team was going to, and they hadn't won the grand final in 72 at that point, I'd made a decision. I got a very good financial offer from St. George, believe it or not. And a good friend of mine, Wayne Greenland, who ended up coming, who I got to Petone a few years later. The club there were aware that I was thinking of, you know, moving somewhere else, and I was still living in Titahi Bay, but I just had a gut feeling that if I go to this club, you know, I really think I could offer them what my skill set was, and they could hopefully benefit from you know, from how I played the game. So basically, from that point on, it was probably the best decision of my life, you know.
Yeah, so that was around about 72, did you say?
72, yeah. I finished playing at 72 in for Porus City, and I think Petone beat Randwick 17-15 at Rugby League Park in the GF the week later. We got knocked out by you guys, believe it or not. And, that's right. Evan Nathan, I remember marking Evan. We used to have some really good, because we played together as well when he was playing at Porus City.
Well, that's right, yeah.
Yeah, you know, so we used to, you know, mark each other up and keep each other honest. He was a good footballer too, Evan, really was.
Well, he would have had his cousin through marriage, Don Munro, playing over at Porirua as well. So
and the Aganews as well.
That's right. You know? That's right.
Yeah. So we had quite a few Rarotongan players, and or Raros as we called them, you know. But look, a great background. But when I came to Petone, I was sort of how do I put it? It was daunting, you know. A, because of the expectation, and B, you know, am I good enough? and I had to sort of, but there were 3 or 4 players and people in the club who how do I put it, sort of really made me comfortable. I'm the only Pākehā in the club, from officials to players, and it was sort of strange for me, and it took me a year or two I felt really be accepted, and I had to prove my worth there, and I did that, hopefully, in most cases, and it was just a brilliant journey for me. Coming to Petone, and working my way through and navigating my way through and forming friendships, so on and so forth,
So that's awesome to hear about that journey. When you came over, so Mike, when Mark arrived, were you already at Petone? So at that time?
But prior to, I spent 3 years playing for Ngātawaia Premiers and that. I played all the grades. Any game that was going, I played. And, they gave me that professional attitude. They had a basketball gym. They had the weight sessions and all that. So if you went to training as a premier, you had to have spikes. You had to have basketball boots. So you had to have that. You had to have a jersey, a change of gear. You had to have your showering gear. If you turned up to training without any one of those things, you didn't train. They taught me right from then. They were quite professional. They entered the Ruparusa. They were the top team in the Waikato when I was back home then. I played a few games on the wing. I was a specialist centre standoff then, but there was too many good players. They were all Waikato reps anyway. My idol then was Bill Deacon, and still is today. Bill Deacon, and so I learned a lot from them. And our summer sport in Ngātawaia here, believe it or not, was rowing. So rowing, if you can handle rowing, the hard ethic work that you have to do, the discipline, you can handle anything. So that was instilled in me as a kid, and the senior players have made sure that I kept in line, and we had good coaches in Ngātawaia. Particularly, we had everyone remembers their schoolboy coach, and we had a fella called Pop Kens, and he coached me when I was a young fella. And, you still remember about just doing the basics with them, and all he had to just do basics. Then I moved down to, but I was down in Petone before Mark. I'd come down in 69. Down in 69 with Monks and another friend, Cal Emery, the nephew of Manga Emery. So we come down and joined up with Petone. So the first training we went to was, we're playing touch. That wasn't me. I was like, 20 aside playing touch, and that sort of wasn't me. I thought, oh no, you don't do training like this. This is not is not pre-season training for me. But we had to adhere to it, because that's all they did. We were going into every school ground, just bludgeoning the fields to train in that, and on tile seal and that. So that was my first introduction to playing for Petone. The attitude was, we'll just make up the numbers, but we're good enough. We've got a good team, but we're not a team. And that's what I thought when I first joined Petone. And plus there was a rivalry. Anyone from the Waikato understands there's a rivalry between Ngātawaia and Huntly. Huntly, that's where most of the king or the queens of they live there. But the palace is in Ngātawaia. So the Ngātawaia people expect the Queen and the King to stay down there at the palace and not down in their residential homes. So there's always that rivalry. To go on to the Urupa, you've got a certain time. So if you're from Ngātawaia and you've got your funeral on the Urupa Taupiri, and you don't come out of there by the time then someone from Huntly's been deemed to their hour to come on, you'll have a standoff, you'll have a fight, there's always, and they're all relations though, so that's rivalry. It's still there today, the rivalry between Ngātawaia and Huntly or Tani Whālau, is still strong. So when I come out to Petone, it was full of Huntly people, it was the arch enemies, and vice versa, and they treated you like that, because they were all Mormons. Mick and him, I don't know if Mick was a Mormon, but he was close enough to a Mormon. Everyone else was Mormon, we had 4 drinkers on the team when I was there, 4 drinkers and everyone was Mormon. It was was hard for me to stomach because I was used to having a beer after the game and that, you know.
Yeah, yeah. No, well, that's interesting background. And Mark was saying, there was an era of feeling daunted coming to Petone. And I think one of the things always with Petone, there's an era of intimidation. And I don't mean that in a physical way. Certainly there was no nonsense when you played Petone, but it sounded like it was an era coinciding when you both arrived, that you were bringing a culture and a mindset about hard training, discipline and structure. So look, I'll go over to you, Mark. Who were some of the people there that were kind of the influences and role models that started bringing the club along, that had a strong influence on you?
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, the chap in front of me right now, Mike was playing very good football at that 72, and he was still pretty young. But when I first got there and went to the first training, Clark Tarafiti, John Hunter, Mike obviously, and then probably Trevor Patrick, guy that who was really influential in the club throughout my time there. So those guys there, I suppose they took them under my wing because they probably felt that I had a bit of a talent, and they thought, and I did feel intimidated. There were a couple of players that sort of made sure that their presence was felt at training and contact, but look, it took a couple of years, but I probably felt really comfortable after about 1973, 74, and I felt accepted. But mate, look, Clark Tarafiti, as I said, John Hunter, those guys, along with Mike, because I played outside a lot of Mike, as you know, and he was also, I suppose, a junior mentor to me. I remember many times talking to Mike, what do I need to do to improve my game, and so on and so forth. But look, those guys were very influential and for a long time, and some of them went on to coach other clubs and be successful. So they certainly had, the ability to, they had good people skills, and players, responded to them.
Mike, just talking about staying on that sort of thing, we talked about Clark earlier, Clark Tarafiti, and it always was something with the Petone Club that they're very innovative and would try new things. And I remember, I would have been a young fella then, and I'd watch the wall kind of move that Petone would have at the taps, and someone would hide the ball up their jersey, and everyone would take off in 5 different directions, and then it was probably you then who ran in the other direction and scored a try. But what was the culture there that sort of brought that innovation and trying new things? So that was something very obvious with the Petone Club.
Well, Clark was before his times. Clark, you'd come down to training. He'd say, "Listen, boys, we're going to do this. You and you'll end up with the ball like this. This is about 6 moves in one sort of corridor."
True.
Everyone would come to me and say, "Ed, what is he trying to explain?" And I'd be the translator. I'd be the translator to say, "Look, this is what he wants. He wants to take it up 2 times here and spin it out the backs and give it to Mark." And he'd go around because he used to speak pidgin English, you see, so half the boys didn't understand, I think only the boys closest to him could understand, but Clark was very innovative, but it was frustrating when you leading up to finals, you had nothing positive, you had nothing concrete. It was change all the time. So we just took it upon ourselves to just do what's going to help us and help us to win. Clark he was fun. He was a lot of fun to be with. It changed. I was working in the chambers at GME. There's one fellow there. His name is Don Everett, and he was doing power weights, and I was interested in weights, but I didn't want to do power weights because I was doing enough weights in the chambers anyway. And I said to him, "Oh, Don, what are you doing weights for?" He said, "Oh, he's the coach." I said, "Oh, yeah, rugby league." I just off the cuff, I said, "Rugby league." He said, "Yeah, I coached Otahu." I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah, I coached Otahu." He said, "Why didn't you put your name forward if they're looking for a coach?" I think Clark was having a little bit of trouble. He just wanted to have a break in it. So I encouraged everyone around us to nominate this Don Everett. Well, It was the best thing that Petone could ever done, because he brought the discipline. You know, he brought that Auckland hard nose. He was Parker. He brought that hard nose in there. But just like Mark said, that a lot of players didn't accept that. You know, they couldn't handle the hard training or the hard nose attitude that he introduced. So he lasted for 1 year, but he was the change in Tony's attitude towards playing football and the discipline. Yeah, me and him used to run around the hill every morning prior to work, you know, and because I was staying in the hostel, everyone used to see me running around on the hill with this Parker fella and wondering who the hell he was. So I said, well, I'll introduce you to him. And he made himself known that he's a rugby league coach, and so they took him on. But he lasted, like I said, he lasted a year because there's so much dissension amongst the boys because they couldn't accept the discipline and the hard work.
Yeah, well, somewhere along the line, that discipline and hard work must have stuck, because the Petone is one of the few clubs that have won 3 grand finals in a row, more than once. And so when did things start clicking, and, you know, started stringing together those grand finals, and then, you know, inevitably the 1982 national club final game, which we'll come to. But yeah.
We always had a nucleus. I think I got a good habit of getting good people together and training together. And most of them are my cousins, you know, I had Bruce Murray and Henry Murray training with me. So we all started running around the hill. And a person called Rusty Morris, one of the better people to play rugby league in the club that we had. I think Mark will attest to that as well. So I always had a nucleus of fellows that would come out and train in there. And that nucleus kept us together. Trevor Patrick was one, ex-SAS, you know, so he was... Right, he used to do the extra training. He used to introduce us to different things as far as his SAS adventures, and they were adventures, you know.
Well, we certainly saw that step up in fitness and application on the field. So, Mark, for you, I'll just reflect going a little earlier back on. Peter Mellis talked about the journey to the '82 final. It didn't just happen. It was a series of meetings that you got together and planned and got ready once you heard there was that. Mate, tell us about that journey that took the team through to the 82 final. And, you know, I do recall Peter talking about there was a lot of extra training sort of techniques that the likes of yourself brought in there as well.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, because I think I read it in the Evening Post of the Dominion that there was going to be, in 1982, there was going to be a National Rugby League comp. And the prize money, I think Wrangler put up in total, I think it was nearly $100,000, because all clubs got money through the journey, through their competitions and through the sections, and it was a $5,000 first prize. So that was the first thing that rang a bell. It was money. But on a serious note, Andre, we actually, when we analysed it, we sat down and we had a meeting around at my place in Bay Street in Petone. I was living there. And we planned our journey nearly to the day, a year out. And we sat down, myself, Trevor Patrick, Mike, and who else was there? There was 4 of us there.
Vern and Noxie.
And Noxie Tohurere, yes. So there was about 4 or 5 of us sat down, and we planned the whole. We basically planned the year to the GF final, to make the final. I mean, and I know history will show that, but once we started the plan, the first part was have a big pre-season in '82. Okay, so this was in November '81, and that came out in the press that this competition was on. So, you know, the alarm bells went on, and we thought, hang on, we're a team that could probably win this. And we sat down, we navigated our way through it. We did a pre-season tour and went up to Pikio and played Pacific, and then we played a Rotorua team. We did a 3-day stint up there, and this was just pre-season. It was in mid-February, stinking hot, and we had sort of in our mind had a squad that we feel would sort of, you know, complement, you know, the team, because it was a long year. As you know, we played a lot of games in Wellington. It's not like over here in the NRL where they play 26 games. We were playing over 30 games, and then we went into the Wrangler Cup, you know, rounds of such a long season. You've got to nurse injuries. So I was fortunate enough to have 3 seasons in Australia. So when I come back in '79, I brought a lot of what I felt was good knowledge in conditioning, not overtaxing players, know when to relax, know when to put the good stuff in, have fun. And there were times, sometimes we'd just sit up, come to training, and it was a crappy night. We'd just go in the sheds and have a bit of a talk, or we'd go down to the Vic Tab, you know, whatever. So we tried to improvise and basically nurse the players through the year. But in saying that, we still had to play footy. We still had to win a premiership in Wellington. We still had to, you know, go through the process. But I think it was probably our instinct to never say die, Andre, you know, through the whole season and other seasons. I mean, I got asked a few times through my footy career, and a lot of people over the years, I mean, they said, you know, why was Petone so good? And I thought about it long and hard, and I've come up with one common denominator all the time, and it's the fear of losing. You know, we had a fear of losing, and because it wasn't acceptable. So that was our genre, and that was our criteria that we had to meet. So the journey for the Wrangler Cup started exactly 11 months before, when we sat down and worked out the things we were going to do, and we changed things up during the year, and we were very fit. You know, we knew how to go the distance. So it was pretty exciting when we sat down and went through the process of what we were planning. And as I said, it started off with that 2-game tour up north, and you know, and they were physical games too. That was, you know, no mucking around. So that was the you know, that was set in stone basically, and we just focused on that. And the peripherals were winning the Wellington Championship to you know, to get to that level. So we had to do that. I think we gave Upper Hutt a bit of a touch up, I think, in the GF in '82. So that was pretty much it, Andre. And then of course, you know, the rest was history, and it's history that we created, and we're something we're very proud of. To be a Wellington team, because I remember TVNZ had planned to play the GF. You know, the Wrangler Cup final in Auckland at Carlaw Park, and they would have got 20 people. So you guys and us really spoilt the plot, and turned on one of the greatest games that's you know, been in Wellington club history. So it was a special time for Randwick and us. I mean, we were so, and I mean it, we were generally rapt that Randwick had knocked over the other Auckland team, because they just couldn't believe it. The two Wellington teams were in the national club final. So that was
well, I remember seeing Randwick build up in those days, and we had a hard run. Had to play Hornby, then had to beat Talanoa, and you know, and they I remember, I think they all played on, you know, soaking wet days, and then we were watching Petone play Otahu. You know, Petone and Otahu had, you know, was a star-studded side, and I think it was Nolan that did the sort of made the break that turned the game around. But for you, Mike, then, you know, leading the team and winning that national club final, you know, maybe what are some of the key moments in that game for you, and then what did that mean to the club winning that national final?
Prior to going up to Auckland, or even in, I think it was about 7-8 weeks before we went up there, I was called into Upper Watine's office, and I had very few dealings with Upper, and I thought I was in trouble, so I went along. And he said to me, he said, Mike, you're going to lead this Petone team to the top. And I don't know what he said after that, because I wasn't interested in what he was saying, but I could remember that. He made that prediction. I said, what about Clark? And he said, no, it's you. So I took that on board, and first time Mark said to me, I think the other night when he rang me up, he said to me, he said, Ed, you know, because he's had a bad run with his cancer too, Mark has. He said, I'm getting this divine intervention everywhere I go now. I should have been buried by now, but we must have had divine intervention up at Otahu during the 2 games, last 2 games. I said, yeah, it was Upper. While we were up in Otahu, Upper passed, and I got a call from our head of our supporters coming up on the train, and she said, oh, Mike, I just got to advise you that Upper has passed. So I got all the Waikato boys together, because he was from Waikato. He taught up in Rakamanga school up there, and I thought what was apt, and we had Mike Puriama, he was our entertainment officer, so we got all the boys together, had a bit of a tangi. I told them what had happened and that, and we just sang a lot of songs and that, and we could feel them in the room with us.
Yeah.
And so that was all forgotten. We went on to, we had an inspirational speaker, Vern would have told you about it, from someone from Tani Wharau to speak to us about, the importance of winning this and why you're here and that. And because he heard about Upper too, so he told us about Upper's influence on Huntly football, his father's influence as a parliamentarian, Steve Waitene. During the game was going all right, it was just to and fro. I don't know who got the better of us in the second, just after the second half, and it didn't look doom and gloom because, like Mark said, we were fit. That's all the work we did on the Korokoro Hill for start. So we used to run from club rooms up around the Korokoro Hill. Mark used to time us. Mark still got the fastest time from going from McEwen Park up around the Korokoro Hill and back again. He could go around twice before I could get back the first time, But during the game, it was looking a bit tight, and Trevor Patrick, I went off over, got replaced. I shouldn't have played the last two games for that knee injury. Mark Story telling me no, you got to play. You got to be influential for the boys out there. You got to play, Ed. You got to play. But I was down to walk. So I got a call from the sideline. So it was Twist Barker, I knew there was another or he wanted to come on. So I went off and I let Twist go on. Yeah. And I was standing beside Trevor Patrick. Trevor Patrick said to me, "Oh man, big fella, looks like this is it. We haven't got a chance." I said, "I think off the cup." I said, "Oh no, up will help us."
Wow.
5 seconds later, Billy Nolan got the ball, passed from Gary, got the ball and shot down the sideline. Poof, it was all over. Yeah. So we did have that extra help from Upper.
Yeah, it was special, wasn't it?
Fabulous, and the club's always had that whakapapa all the way back through to Tainui, and so it's no wonder that was going to always be there spiritually for the team, and they just had to pull it together. Just to mention too, we talked earlier about there used to be pre-season games with Tani Wharau, and Mark, you were saying if you thought playing likes the Harbour City and Wharfies down in Wellington were going to be a battle, what was it like when you had those Tani Wharau games?
Oh, mate, I remember the first time in '73 we travelled up on the bus overnight and was singing songs. It was pretty special, and once again, still away, only white when the club, right across the board. But I had embraced the culture at Petone at that point. And mate, I remember coming up on the bus and we were having such a good time. And then we stayed on a marae somewhere. I can't remember which one, but anyway, we stayed on it, and that was an eye opener for me. I can assure you of that. All the boys having a lot of fun, but. Mate, when we turned up at the ground was it Davies Park, Mike? I think it was Davies Park, and it was just a cow paddock. Seriously, the grass was about 4, 5, 6 inches long. But when the game started, I remember winning. I remember the score, because I have a knack for remembering scores, and we beat them 14-10. But by gee, it was probably. Even for a skinny white winger out there, I mean, everybody was targeting everybody, and it was another level for me, and well, I felt anyway. But it was pretty natural for a lot of the Waikato boys, the Tanny boys, Narawahia, and those Turinga Waiwai, those guys, and it was just another level. To this day, I still think, gee whiz, that was physical, and it was grubby. Don't get me wrong. It was tribe versus tribe, no question about that. It was very tribal, and but once we walked off the paddock, it was just a great environment. But by gee, for 80 minutes, I hadn't experienced that, and. It was really physical, really quick. Torrid. It was a grind. It was a beat up. And there were shots all over the place. And but to be out wide and watch it happening, I didn't take too many scoops from dummy half, I can assure you that. Sing air. So but a wonderful experience. And then I think they came down the next year, and I think we beat them 2 in a row, Mike. I think we did. And then the next year, I was away in '76. I was over playing in Queensland, and I was away for 3 seasons, and always kept my eye on what was going on here. But I think that was probably about the last time we played them, back in 75, 76, 77, something like that. But no, you touched on Tane Wharau and the Petone connection and the rivalry. It sort of rivaled the Ramick-Petone rivalry in many ways.
Yeah, it was worse than that, Mark. It was war. You know, it was bash or be bashed.
I'll use the term lightly.
Yeah. I think after the last time Mark played against Tane Wharau, they went up on the bus. At the time they went up on the bus anyway, and Mark was he won a bet for collecting the koha. So we had a shop then. Me and everyone had a shop, and I couldn't travel up on the Friday night with them, so I stayed back. And Mark he must have been conned, or someone threatened him to do the koha anyway. So he collected the koha, he went around with a closed bag, and then went around the koha. Well, after the game, we got snubbed. And I was wondering what the hell we got snubbed for. And I looked around for someone I knew so I could ask. And I eventually found someone. I said, how come we're getting snubbed here, man? He said, well, did you ask that Parker fellow? And I said, no, I haven't asked him. I'm not going to ask him. And why are we getting snubbed? He said, well, he handed over a koha, and he only handed over $20.30. 100 people. And they fed us for 3 days, you know. And, we didn't go back to Tane Wharau after that. We couldn't go back, you know. It was so shameful.
Well, I'm sure they got looked after when they come down by the by you fellas or your manaki. Hey, look, just quickly to start rounding up, like at the end of sort of playing for Petone, like for you, Mike, you got into coaching and with the Wellington scene and a Wellington selector as well.
Yep. Yeah, it was. I got involved with coaching, being a selector first. Everywhere I went, I had some people who wanted to help me. Howie handed in a job with the Central Districts, and they targeted me because I was doing so well with Petone and that, you know, and I wanted to move out. And they asked me if I wanted to coach Central Districts because they were, you know, I think they were coming last about then. And this old fellow in the pub, Alan Smith, his name is, old Parker fellow, sitting there, just drinks his beer, does a crossword. He said to me, Mike, I just read in the paper that you're going to coach Central Districts. And I said, yeah. He said, can I come up with you when you go to the meeting? I said, yep. Cut a long story short. After the meeting, he said, can I say a few words? And Bernie was there. Bernie was the chairman. And he said, I'd like to sponsor the team. I'll sponsor the team for 10 grand, you know. And I only know him from seeing him in the pub, you know. So then I become a selector for the second division, and me and Duncan Tangiro. I got a ring from Jim Courtney Cup, you know, they would play for that. Well, him and his son owned half of Petone. And he said to Mike, I hear you're going to travel all over the lower North Island. I said, yeah. He said, I'll fly you there. I said, what? He said, I'll fly you and who have you got as your second in command? I said, oh, okay, Jim. I took him on, told Bernie, I said, this fella's going to fly us around. I'll just call his bluff. Well, we got a first, he had a Holden, and he said, I'll drive you out to Paraparaumu. So he drove us out to Paraparaumu. Well, if his bloody piloting was as good as his driving, man, you know, I wouldn't have got on the plane. I didn't want to get on the plane because, you know, that white line down on the side of the road, the truckies follow that white line on this side, but he was following the white line on that side, you know, and we could see all. We thought he was going to crash because Jim was about 77, 78, you know, he's old full of glasses and that, but he flew us around. He flew us up to Taranaki, up to Gisborne, up to Hawke's Bay on his plane. I always had someone to help me. Then I got into coaching. People come and approach me. Even now, I try and hide away if I go and watch the local games just in case I get caught up with someone who wants to help. Basically, I will help them, but I'm trying to avoid it as much as possible. So I did a lot of coaching and that all over the place. And one of the pleasing, I went to Harbour City to help them out there. I won 3 with 2 competition, 2 grand finals with Eddie Albright.
Yeah.
I went to Upper Hutt, won 2 there, the under-19s and the premiers, anticipating Tyrone to come back after I'd won with Upper Hutt. Then I went to Te Aroa, won 2 there with Te Aroa. So
fabulous. Yeah.
Yeah, it was my ethics that helped the club, I was only there for a little time. A lot of people had done all the groundwork anyway before I got there, it was just my change of attitudes to everyone. And my communication skills, I think my communication skills, there was no hierarchy as far as I was concerned, If you were a premier, you were just as good as the 3rd graders, we mingled. Yep. I didn't get them to say, just because you're premier, you go there and sit over there, you get all the benefits. No, I didn't work like that.
No, it's good. All that background came through to, be a winner of them as well. And for you, Mark, you obviously went to Aussie and you've been there for a while now, but remember, Brian, just a little bit about what you've done between leaving. But one of the things I remember being set up was the touch football competition in Wellington, which seemed to come out of the Petone Club back in those days.
Yeah, no, that's correct, Andre. I was 3 or 4 years I had in Australia. I played a lot of touch football. It was a lot more professionally done over there. There was big competitions and was prize money. It was very popular, especially through the summer months. So when I come back home here, I came home in '79, and we had an interclub competition just between 4 or 5 Petone teams. We put up prize money, etc. Yeah. And that was very successful. So the next year in 1980. I started an 8-team comp that had a lot of the Wellington Rugby Union players, and it was an over 30s comp, which was just right, because it was ideal. A lot of the players were still playing first grade rugby union, but still playing first grade rugby league. So you had a lot of All Blacks that had retired, and of course had your brother, you had John Wett, you had a lot of the Ramick boys, your Pratties, and then you had a lot of the Petone boys, and there was a Rabbit, there was a Kingfishers team, and we had an 8-team comp, and that started the next year. I think there was another comp somewhere else that started up that we started up out near Johnsonville somewhere, and from that point on, from an 8-team comp starting back in 1980. To how many teams are in so they may be a life member. When I left, I was chairman of the Wellington Touch Football for probably 5 or 6 years, and then because I moved to Australia, so we had meetings, and Tamatua, he took over from me, the St George player, and the game just, as we know, it just fostered, and it's huge, So
man.
I enjoyed. Represented New Zealand, and then I made the Australian team for the 1995 World Cup team. And if you remember Bernie Lowther, New Zealand. I used to play a lot of touch footy with him and a few other guys. And anyway, I found out one day someone from the Brisbane Touch Association, when I made the Australian side, they said that you're the first player to play for Australia and New Zealand. So it was something I sort of didn't plan, but it just popped up, And then when I sort of finished over here, I got into coaching rugby league and had about a 20-year coaching from juniors right up to first grade. And my biggest success was coaching the Queensland Māori team for 6 years.
Wow,
and I had players like Cody Nikorima, Tony Carroll. And a lot of players from New Zealand, because they asked me back in 2009 to do the gig. Anyway, I took the job on. It was a national tournament, and I coached them for 6 years, and we won 6 titles. So awesome. And then the health kicked in, and I had to pull the pin after that. But one of my special times was coaching the Queensland Māori side. I just loved it, and embraced it, loved it. Once again, the only white boy in the whole camp. It sort of just followed me around, I was just born the wrong colour.
Someone needs to organise the money,
Yeah, well, someone's got to do it,
Congratulations on that, Mark. And even going back to that touch and where it started at McEwen Park, I remember there were players like Murray Mexted there, and the play you basically had, you had senior footballers playing touch, like the Premier League senior first rugby players are going up against each other. It was interesting to see the different skill sets as well from both games, and it seemed to occur to me that the league guys were, it was more our game really. It was, on defence, on attack, and we knew how to hit the gaps a lot differently. But I think the games are a lot closer now in terms of rugby and league, and the athletes are similar in the types of things they do. And for you, Mike, what are you up to now? So you've got the business that's back down here, and some time in Tainui as well.
Yeah, it was just after the touch got they cut it down to 6 players, and we looked for another sport. So I had dealings with Perry Haddock, and he was running the flag. Yeah. And through my good friend Ray Waka, he was the advocate. He was the promoter over here, and we introduced flag football. Yeah. And we couldn't get the flag, so we had 3 tests against Australia. One over here at Te Whiti Park, one over there, and it's supposed to be a return one. But we couldn't get our flags. It was named flag football. We couldn't get our flags through customs. And Ray did say to me, and Perry said, "Oh, can you get those flags through customs, Mike? Do you know in customs?" I said, "Yeah, I know the person, Gary Smith." So Gary Smith was in customs. So I rang him up. I got Yvonne to ring him up, and told him we got these flags, and it was a game of football thing, and he knew it. And so he got the flags cleared for us. So we got the flags here. They call it Ripper Rugby now. Yeah, but it was instigated by us through Perry Haddock, and through us to play flag football.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people don't appreciate and or know that that's common, that Ripper Rugby, the flag, that actually all came out of league. There was a league training technique 30 years ago, and that's how the players were learning how to. Because touch makes you run away from the defence, eh?
Yeah,
when you got the flag, you'll confront the defence, and you'll target the right hip areas when it comes to tackling.
It's more conducive to rugby league. We've got Mick Reedy, who's pretty high up in the rugby union. He will let them know that where touch come from. He will let them know where flag come from too, because he was one of the disciples of the game. Amongst us that time.
Hey, look. Awesome kōrero, gents. I'm sure we could spend another hour talking, and I think it would be good to have another session with maybe a couple of other people from the same area, because I feel like there's a lot more that we would talk about. But we'll wrap things up there. I just want to thank you both for giving your time to talk on Mana Talanoa Legends of League. Look, it's been a privilege. Learned a hell of a lot about your backgrounds. Thank you for sharing some of those really close stories about family, about your journey through league. So once again, ngā mihi nui kia kōrua. Thank you very much for your time. And
can I just say one thing, please, Andre? Just to John, for me and Yvonne, Knox, and I'll just forget her name at the moment. I shouldn't. And Clarkie and Bella. All our prayers and thoughts go to you, John.
No, much acknowledged, and thank you. He'll be watching this, and it'll be much appreciated.
We're good mates, Andre, me and John. He never tackled me, and I never tackled him.
Great one.
Just quickly before I go, back in when John was playing, such good football back in the early 70s, and that, he was my hero. John Whittaker was my hero, believe it or not. I respected the man. We didn't get on too well on the paddock, but I always had huge respect for him, and he was my hero because he'd gone to England. They won the series there 2-1, first time ever or whatever, and he was just one of the top footballers at the time, Andre. And I always, we never saw eye to eye on the paddock. He was always trying to knock my head off, and on top of that, but always had a huge respect and admired, what he delivered to the game. So. I hope that his, he can, see some sunshine and light at the end of the tunnel. I know what he's going through. I can assure you that. Hopefully, things will bode well for him, and I wish him really well.
Oh, sure. Thanks very much, both of you, and all the best. Thank you.